Hello and welcome to West Indies on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. My name is Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me as ever is Santoki Nagilendran, the other half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. West Indies on 99.94 is your new home for West Indies cricket content, and we'll be dropping into your podcast feed on YouTube or the 99.94 app several times every week. So like, rate, review, share, subscribe. You know the drill, and thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation. So, Santoki, it's as of the time of recording, it's early February, and regional cricket has returned. Red ball cricket, the truest format of the game, as people want to say, has returned to our region. It's only a 5-round season, but people are excited. We're genuinely excited to see what new names come to the forefront, who makes a claim for West Indies red ball duty possibly later in the year, or 18 cricket. But we're going to chop this one up. We're going to chew this one up, and we're going to let the people know all about West Indies regional cricket. Santoki, take it away.
Yeah, and some of our listeners might say, why are these two guys so excited about the return of regional cricket? We've been denied staff to regional cricket in 2020 and 2021, unlike other regions in the world. And it only feels like yesterday, Mash, that the 2022 season finished in June, but we're back again. 2023 season, as you said, it's an opportunity for players to stake their claim for a West Indies call-up. And it's an interesting one for the first few rounds, Mash, because obviously with the West Indies senior team in Zimbabwe, there's the regular test players aren't playing regional cricket. So I guess there's two sides of the coin with the opening stages of the season. One, you could say it's an opportunity for players to raise their hand, make a claim with big performances. On the other, you can say, how competitive is the season if you haven't got the test players to kind of use as a gauge, as a metric to see how performances stack up. But it's interesting, we're as of recording, we're coming up to the final day of the first round, and we've already seen some youngsters throw their names into the hat with some big performances. And we're here to sort of dissect it and also talk about what we're hoping to see in the regional season over the coming months. So I think, Mash, if we go, let's go match by match. So the first match, which does have a result, Windward Islands against Trinidad and Tobago, was a draw. Windward Islands hit 2-4-3, Trinidad and Tobago 3-1-5 in reply. Now, the second inning is probably what we're going to talk about a lot for the Windward Islands. 4-2-5 for 5 declared, and unfortunately for them, they were not able to bowl Trinidad and Tobago out. Trinidad, in their fourth innings, hung on 225 for 7, so it ended in a draw. But I think, Mashal, the headline, not only for this match, but probably in the region as a whole for this round, Kimani Melius, the 22-year-old from St. Lucia, a blistering 192 off 270 balls. And Mashal, for a lot of people, this might be the first time they've heard of Kimani Melius. We've kind of been following him for the past few years. Do you just want to talk about sort of the potential of Melius?
Yeah, and Kimani Melius is almost like a really good microcosm into some of the wider issues when it comes to West Indies cricket. And what I mean by that is as follows. Kimani is 22 years old. Now, at the under-19 level, everybody spoke about Kimani Melius and his potential. I'm not saying that everyone said he's going to definitely become a West Indies senior cricketer, but certainly based on his kind of base skills and the kind of ceiling that many believed he had, we thought he was one to watch. And in fact, earlier this week, you brought up one of our tweets in, I think, 2020, when we said Kimani Melius is one to watch. We think he could play for West Indies very, very soon. Now, Melius had, I think, captained the side in, I think it's the 2019 Under-19 World Cup. It might be one previous to that. And the reason why I say he's a microcosm of wider issues in West Indies cricket is the gap, generally speaking, for West Indian cricketers. We are super talented at the under-19 level, and then something goes wrong between under-19 level and senior cricket level. And by senior cricket level, I mean West Indies senior cricket. The developmental gap is either poor, not good enough, or it doesn't really bridge the gap that the bigger, quote unquote, nations have the capacity to do so in world cricket. Really and truly, someone like an Alzari Joseph or Jaden Seals, they're a 1 in a million chance where they essentially excel at under 19 level and immediately excel once they touch the senior side straight away. The majority of our cricketers do well at under 19 level, and then it takes them the best part of anywhere between 5 to 10 years to show any kind of reward or payback on their potential. Now, with Kamani, it must be stated, he was part of the West Indies on the West Indies emerging players side. So he had the benefit of working with West Indies emerging players. That's the same side that would have had players like Josh De Silva in, etc., etc. More recently, he paid for and funded himself to come to England and work with Toby Radford to work on his batting. And obviously, we've seen that now bear fruits in the first round of the domestic championship. So I think I come back to you, Santoki, to say, what's that really saying? Is it the fact that he got some earlier academy work in? Is it the fact that he's worked with Toby Radford? Do those two things shine a light on both, I guess, the benefits, but also the woes of our kind of developmental system?
Yeah, I think it does, Mash, because I think not every player is going to have the privilege to be able to fly to England and specifically work with a high performance coach. So it does show essentially he's kind of taken an unorthodox route in some ways in regards to his coaching with Toby Radford to make it at this level. And as you said, he's also been through the academy system. So it's like, it's almost as if at the moment, if you're a youngster, you're making it in spite of the traditional system. You have to kind of go the extra mile, pave your own way to kind of make it. But I think it is very promising. I think we've seen with Tagenarine Chanderpaul and Craig Brathwaite, they're very attritional batters as openers. Kimani Melius, if he can put these consistent performances together, he could be like a David Warner kind of opener, like an aggressive opener who kind of takes it to the bowlers. So I think he does offer something different. It would be good to see. Obviously, naturally within the region, there'll be some calling for him if he puts up these performances over the next few rounds for him to make the West Indies side. I think it's too early, but I think he's a prime example of someone who should get a call up for the A team later on this year if he does put in these performances at 22 years old. And it's also good to see Alec Afanese, the captain of the Windward Islands, 24 years old from Dominica as well, carry on with a half century in that second innings. He's someone I think who's further along the line and who we'll hopefully see make West Indies colours sooner rather than later. I think, Mash, let's just finally touch upon this one game between Windwards and Trinidad. I think it's a contradiction at the moment. We've talked about Kimani Melius, Alec Afanese for Windward Islands, young promising players. With Trinidad and Tobago, it's very interesting because they've picked Darren Bravo, Jason Mohammed, sort of the stalwarts of their batting lineup, where someone like a Jai Gully, 25 years old, a promising player, didn't make the 11. Sort of, what's your take on it? Obviously, teams want to pick their best players to win, but do you just think, I know we've mentioned it last season as well, and it seems to be carrying on this season. Do you think Trinidad and Tobago are sort of stagnant in picking the same players, recurring players who are aging rather than, picking potential players who are in that mid-20 bracket?
Yeah, it's an interesting argument, and maybe in this first round we've seen some of the signs of why they still have the experienced players in and amongst it. So some will say, okay, Bravo failed because he made 38 and 23, but at the end of the day, Bravo's captain. And I think we've got to look at this logically. Darren Bravo's just turned 34. It would make sense to have an experienced player as captain of the side. I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. I think Bravo's still got at least 2, if not more, years of certainly domestic cricket to give back to the system and help some of these younger players develop. Someone like a Jason Mohammed, who is 35 going on 36, on one hand, we could say, so why are Trinidad still persisting with a Jason Mohammed? But then on the other hand, one of the biggest reasons why Trinidad saved the match is because Jason Mohammed led the way in the second innings with 79 not out of 200 odd balls. So it kind of explains, it kind of gives you a kind of insight as to why experienced players are still needed. Arguably, some might say you put a Jai Gully in that situation, he can only develop by learning to try and bat to save matches. Or do you have the experienced player to ensure that Trinidad don't lose matches like that? Because at the end of the day, and this is kind of one of the kind of integral issues of playing within the Caribbean, we are nations at the end of the day. It's not your county, it's not your state, it is your nation. And these nations are prideful and they want to win. And if the argument still goes that the best way for Trinidad and Tobago to win, or rather not lose matches, is to have Jason Mohammed in their middle order, then I think that's always going to win out, because ultimately that shows that their priority is what's the best thing for Trinidad, not what's the best thing for West Indies. Because the best thing for West Indies would be to put Gooley in the side, right? But I think this shows that nations are still looking at it from a perspective of what's best for our nation. And although we're not touching on Guyana yet, when we get to Guyana, the same argument we're making here, you could look at Guyana and say, but how comes Leon Johnson is still playing? Because that's best for Guyana. That's not necessarily best for West Indies at this specific moment in time. So I think there's two ways of looking at it, Santoki.
Yeah, I think we have in the region, as you said, a unique ecosystem because it's nations. I mean, in England, the counties sort of accommodate what England selectors want and are looking for. So, at the moment in England, counties are going to be more attacking to suit the baseball nature of England cricket and prepare players for that. Whereas, as you said, because we're independent nations, everyone is essentially looking to win for patriotic reasons. So you've got a contradiction there again in terms of not necessarily serving West Indies cricket, rather you're serving your nation. So I can completely see, I agree with you, why Darren Barber and Jason Mohammed have been picked. But if you're looking at it from a holistic point of view, a lot of fans and stakeholders might say, hold on, Jai Gooley is someone who deserves that opportunity. But it wasn't only the senior players for scoring for Trinidad and Tobago. Amir Jangu put up a good 86. And Kari Pierre, this left-arm spinner, playing his first class game in 3 years. He came into the side. It'd be interesting to get his opinions on if he thinks he can make the West Indies side as a left armer with, Moti, Warwick and Veersamy ahead of him. But it's good to see him back playing first class cricket. So we're going to take a quick break, Mash, and when we come back, we'll have a look at the big game in the region, Barbados versus Guyana.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Now, moving on to Barbados, the defending champions are playing Guyana, who will be strong contenders, or in their belief, strong contenders to win the title this season. A big opening clash. And Machel, there was only one headline, similar to Kimani Melius for the Windward Islands. Matthew Nandu, the 19-year-old opener, coming in for his debut in the regional season. First innings, 126 of 331 balls. An immense performance, very similar to what we'd see of a Tej Narayan Chanderpaul-esque performance. Impressive considering the batting order didn't really support him. Kevin Sinclair lower down the order scored a 43 to kind of help him out. But just for the context, Matthew Nandu, his father played cricket for Guyana, a few regional games. He's actually born and raised, Matthew Nandu, in Canada. He played through the Canada youth ranks. He played his off seasons in Guyana, and that's sort of how he made it into the region through the Guyana under-17 team, and then eventually the West Indies under-19 team. So now he stepped up. He's came in for his first game, scored a century, and it was a very, very composed innings on a tough pitch. He was very patient. He showed what we're sort of looking for. I think if between me and yourselves, Mass, if we ask what we're looking for from batting performances, it's that sort of composed performances, soaking up balls, showing your technique, not playing any rash shots. And I think Matthew Nandu filled that criteria. So, Mash, just looking at that performance in isolation, just how excited or how promising do you think Matthew Nandu can be?
Yeah, I think that point you made at the end is the most important point, right? England have quote unquote Bazball. I know they don't like the term, but let's leave it like that. England have Bazball. We want grind ball because where our cricket is at, we aren't in any position to be trying to force wins with expansive batting. As we would have seen in Australia, the best way of West Indies, and against England actually last year when we actually won, but this is what we wanted to see in Australia, I should say, is the best way of West Indies winning test matches in this era is by not losing them first and foremost. And in order for West Indies to not lose test matches, we actually need to produce more batters in the mould of a Craig Brathwaite, in the mould of a Tagenarine Shandapur, and in the mould of an Nkrumah Bonner. And some people will cuss and get on and say, no, we need to have more expansive batters. But look at how Jermaine Blackwood gets cussed out when he gets out to a loose shot, or when Carl Mayers gets out to a loose shot. So where we are at in our developmental stages of West Indies cricket, we have to keep playing grind ball. So when I saw Nandu's 126, what did it come off again? 300 and I can't even remember. 331 balls. Immediately, my ears started pricking up, and I'm like, okay, I'm seeing somebody who puts a price on their wicket. When we talk about the decline of West Indies in red ball cricket over the last 20 years, one of the things that we suffered with when it came to batting decline was the inability to stay at the crease for any amount of time. And that's why when Bonner made the side, people liked Bonner in the team, because he had the ability to just stay at the crease and accumulate runs. By no means am I saying Matthew Nandu must immediately jump into the West Indies team. That's not my point. But my point is that we should pay attention. What's quite interesting, though, Santoki, coming back to you, is Nandu's not in the West Indies Academy. And possibly that's because of, exactly as you say, he's in Canada. So I just wonder, let's say Nandu makes some more runs, right, at various different stages, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, right? Let's say make some more runs, and that gets him into the Headley Week series at the end of our 5-round championship. I'm just intrigued to know, where does Nandu go next from that? Because he's not part of the West Indies Academy. Does he get into the next cohort of the West Indies Academy? Like, what do you think is the next developmental? Do we have to just fast track him into the A team? What do we do next with him?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I guess I'm not sure on his personal circumstances. I imagine he's probably based in Canada, so it would depend on if he wanted to uproot himself and be based at the academy in the region. If not, it could be a case of having to fast track him in the A team, but I think it will very much depend on his performances. If he's scoring a century again in the next round, there will be talk naturally of fast tracking him into the A team. So I think it depends on his performances in this season, and then there'll probably be talks with Cricket West Indies. But on the flip side, Mash, Tevin Imlak, someone who we've talked about as someone who we can see playing Test cricket for West Indies eventually, had promising performances, bagged a pair. So not a great match for him, for Guyana. So it was very disappointing. And you touched on it earlier, Leon Johnson. There'd been a lot of cuss-outs and controversy in the build-up to the season. Johnson himself had said the selectors hadn't told him he was in the side. He had to find out on Facebook. 35 years old, there's been question marks about whether he should still be playing in the side. You'd feel Johnson, Mash, this season would have to put up big performances to sort of justify his place. I mean, if he continues to score low, you could see him getting dropped mid-season. But do you think, I mean, you touched on it a bit earlier, do you think it is time for Guyana? Johnson's created this dynasty, 5 titles in a row. Do you think he's approaching 36 years old? Do you think it is time for Guyana Harper Eagles to sort of move on from Johnson and give the captaincy to someone a bit younger?
The question, particularly in the red ball game, is who do they give the captaincy to? You could say, well, just an Anthony Bramble, but he's somebody who's getting on himself, right? Yeah. So the wider question for Guyana is, who does it go to? Does it go to Versamy Permaul because of his experience levels at the international stage? So that's the first question the Guyanese selectors would have to ask themselves. My wider issue, Santoki, is Johnson's also captaining in Super 50. So it's not just a red ball issue here. Certainly later on in the year, you would expect that they would pass the white ball captaincy to Hetmeyer now, because assuming Hetmeyer is available and makes himself available for Super 50. So I think there's a wider changing of the guard that probably has to now come within Guyanese cricket, and it can be hard. I mean, they've made like Christopher Barnwell seems to have now been moved on. They seem to have moved on past him. So it's not like there's not precedent for moving on past senior established players. And because Johnson's cussed out the processes, they kind of have a pretext to move on past him as well. They might use a punishment pretext to move on past him as well. So only runs can keep him in the team, in my mind, Santoki. But before you kind of address that, though, I do just want to say, because before the Bajans get onto us and say, what about our side? So I do just want to say, from a Barbados perspective, whilst the batting hasn't really shown up per se, I mean, Shamar Brooks hit a 50. and he'll want to get some runs to try and put himself back into contention. I was more impressed with the pace that I saw from Jair McAllister. He was bowling some serious heat against the Guyanese bowlers. Akeem Jordan, we know more about. He's got the ability to swing the ball, get some inward movement, and use the conditions to his benefit. But I feel like we've been knowing about Akeem Jordan for a while now. So it's more the Barbados bowlers that I've been impressed by, rather than what they've done with the bat. But it's worth pointing out that of all the teams in the region, Barbados are the ones who are weakened the most by West Indies call-ups, I should say, whether that be a Roston Chaser, Jason Holder, a Kimar Roach, etc. Barbados do get weakened quite significantly when West Indies are playing. So I just wanted to touch on that with Barbados, Santoki.
Yeah, no, very good point. Barbados, their batting is very, very depleted. I guess you could say it's kind of a compliment to them that they always have regular batsmen in the test side, which means their regional side is depleted. And also Keon Harding, who has been on the fringes of West Indies. He was a part of the tour in 2020. He also performed well, taking 3 wickets, I think, in the second innings. So as you said, Mash, the bowling for Barbados has been exceptional. And also shout out to Wansford Beaton, the Montserrat-born player. He was in the West Indies white ball setup for a while. He had question marks over his action about 4 or 5 years ago. He's made his first return to cricket in about 4 years now, being called up for the Guyana Harpy Eagles. So it'd be good to see him get some wickets and put in some good performances over the coming season. Now, Mash, we're going to take our second and final break. And when we're back, we're going to be looking at the Jamaica Scorpions versus the Leeward Island Hurricanes.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Yes, Santoki. So we're back, and there's one more match which is currently ongoing and possibly could be the most thrilling match of the 3 coming into its final day today, and that is the Leeward Island Hurricanes versus Jamaica. Santoki, can you just read the scorecard and I'll go with the first talking point?
Yeah, so the Leeward Islands put up 260 all out. Jamaica in reply 234. Now, in their second innings, the Leeward Hurricanes are 198 for 7 as of recorded, 224 runs ahead of Jamaica. So you'd imagine they'd either try to get some quick runs in the morning or declare overnight and set Jamaica a total for the final day. So we could see a result in that. But Mash, sort of what has been your highlight so far in this match?
Well, Santa, let's start with the talking point. I feel we come back to this talking point. I feel like we come back to this talking point at least once every 2-3 weeks or so. And we have to start with Rakeem Cornwall, Santoki. So Rakeem Cornwall thus far in this match has made 29 off 70 odd balls. He's taken a fifer. He's scored, I think he's on 56 not out in the second innings at the time of recording. Now, a few weeks back, Santoki, you and I were talking about Rakeem Cornwall, and I said to you, what's Rakeem Cornwall supposed to do, right? And in fact, I think we even said the chances are, if Rakeem plays the majority of the first class season, that he's going to be in the top 3 wicket takers in the competition. He's already got a fifer in his first innings of bowling in the competition. Say he goes on to take loads of wickets, Santoki, and makes runs as well. Do you think the sheer weight of numbers forces the selectors to have to recall Rakeem Cornwall, or do you think there is just nothing he can do?
It's a tough one because he will put up the performances. We've already seen it in the early stages of this first game. He knows his regional game inside out. He's almost too good for this level in terms of he can put performances with the bat and the ball. Now, it's an interesting one because usually I would say I don't think Rakeem Cornwall has a chance of making the side. However, we have seen in the media, international media, over the past 2-3 weeks, articles coming out about players being discriminated against because of their body size, their body weight. So I don't know, because it's become a big talking point, I don't know if this could force selectors to either address it or have that conversation with Rakeem Cornwall. Because if you're if you're not picking him based on his performances, I mean, his performances last season, he was the leading wicket taker. So that in theory means naturally he should have been in the West Indies side. If he's not being in, we have to deduce from that it is his size and his body size, which is holding him back from being called up. But if there is scrutiny now on that sort of informal policy being in place in international cricket, unless the selector say there's another reason, i.e. he's failed a fitness test or something along those lines, I think there will be pressure from, fans and stakeholders as to why Rakeem Cornwall's not making the side. So it'll be interesting. I don't think he'll make it the side for the South Africa series. It's too soon. But looking at that India home series in July, I think there'll be serious question marks asked on the selectors if Rakeem Cornwall wasn't in the conversation, or if his omission wasn't addressed specifically by Desmond Haynes and Roland Butcher.
Yeah, most definitely, and I think also we have to bear in mind that the wider public will want answers. The only thing that keeps Rakeem out in the wider public's eyes is if, obviously in Zimbabwe right now, if Gudakesh Motie bowls really well, then naturally people say, well, obviously the kind of incumbent spinner has to stay in the side. But say, for example, Roston Chase doesn't perform, okay, in a kind of all-round perspective, it gets harder and harder to justify why Rakeem cannot make the side. And I guess all I could say really going further on it, Santoki, is that if he cannot make the side, people have to be transparent and say it's nothing to do with his numbers. Because the numbers speak for themselves. So people just want transparency. What exactly is it that is keeping him out of the side? And it just seems there's a lot of kind of smoke and mirrors around Rakeem Cornwall. It's all because even I can't say to you now, Santoki, 100% what the reason is Rakeem is out, why Rakeem's not involved. We can speculate and we can presume, but there's too much cloak and mirrors involved when it comes to Rakeem Cornwall, which leads to far too much speculation, and that falls back on Cricket West Indies. There has to be transparency as to what keeps him out and what he needs to do to force his way in, Santoki. But I mean, moving away from Rakeem ever so slightly, I mean, there obviously is the big Rakeem Cornwall issue. Has there been any other performers that have kind of caught, well, from the Jamaica perspective, I think you're going to go to one name, but has there been any other performers that have caught your eye in terms of somebody people should keep a keen interest in?
Yeah, I think well, looking at the bowlers of Leeward Islands, Sheena Berridge and Jeremiah Louis, they're always someone who come up with impressive bowling. But I think just looking from the Jamaica perspective, Leroy Luck, as an opener for Jamaica, played a blistering in 79 of 82. I think Jamaica's similar to Barbados in that, this season they're missing Blackwood, Brandon King, who else? Nkrumah Bonner. So they're also very depleted. But I think the one name you were referencing for Jamaica making his debut, Abijal Mansingh, and ironically, he was only called up as a medical replacement during the game, so he wasn't initially picked in the 11. He's coming as an all-rounder, took 3 wickets in the first innings, hit a half century in the for Jamaica when he batted. Mash, what can you tell us about Abijal Mansingh and sort of his role in Jamaican Scorpions? Oh, you're on mute, Mash, I think.
Apologies, people. I had a conversation a few days ago with Jerome Foster, part of Radio Jamaica, and he spoke about how Mansingh's leg spin is seen as almost like, I don't want to say mystery, but it's seen as like a game-changing bonus. Could come off, might not come off. Based on what I've seen in the Leeward Islands game, what I've liked is his control. Obviously, we know with leg spin, sometimes you can get absolutely taken to the cleaners if it's not your day. And we've seen that happen with someone like a Hayden Walsh in the past, right? But I've liked the level of control and dip and flight that Mansingh has shown with his leg spin bowling. At the time of recording, he's taken 2 extra wickets in the second innings. So he's got 5 wickets for the match plus a 50. But the impression I was given, certainly coming out of the Jamaica camp, was that there was, I guess, more expected from Mansingh with the bat, and that the leg spin would be an added bonus. And as you say, Santoki, when you're called in as a kind of medical replacement, it's about taking and seizing your opportunity. And we have to give props to Mansingh because he's made himself undroppable for the next game. And that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask for from young cricketers, that when you're given a chance, you perform so well that it keeps experienced players out. So I'm going to be very intrigued to see how Mansingh goes in round 2, presuming he has made himself undroppable, and therefore what how he performs over the remainder of the competition, as and when some of the quote unquote bigger name test players come back to represent Jamaica.
Yeah, no, I think he might be an addition to the grind ball revolution in the Caribbean, because you'd expect a leg spinning all rounder who comes lower down the order. If you told someone he scored a half century, you'd expect that to come at like 100 strike rate, sort of him just blistering it. But he scored 56 of 176 balls, so a very patient, composed inning. So as you said, it kind of suits the narrative that we've been talking about of players playing composed, patient innings in this round. And long may it continue. We're seeing it at the moment with Tagenarine Chandimal and Craig Brathwaite at the top of the order for West Indies cricket. I think we haven't, as a test side, Mash, correct me if I'm wrong, for the past few years, we haven't had a distinct style or philosophy to the test side. So, I mean, a lot of fans will say it's not good to watch, but I think playing these type of innings, attritional innings where we sort of break down bowlers, is where West Indies need to head, because we seem to have players who can fill that void. And also, it's easier to develop and teach if you've got a style that runs throughout the system and team. They know what they need to do. So long may this continue into future rounds. And it's been impressive from a few young players in this round. So hopefully we see it. The next round starts in a few days. So hopefully we see those performances continue.
Most definitely. And as we record people and as we bring this episode to an end, West Indies are staying true to our grind ball philosophy, because at the time of recording, West Indies are approaching 100 without loss against Zimbabwe of 45 over Santoki. So let's get fully behind the grind ball revolution, Santoki.
Listen, when you're a lead selector, I look forward to seeing Brathwaite, Tage, Nandu, Bonner. Yeah, and you'll declare that you only want to see 50 strike rate or under.
Yeah,
in the grind ball revolution.
Bunner Bazball. It's all about grind ball out here. West Indies bringing grind ball back to 2023, Santoki.
But you know what? On an actual serious point, it actually would be poetic justice, because for so many years we've been tarnished as being headless team, that plays calypso cricket. We can't think. So if there was a grind ball revolution where players hit 20 off 100 balls and completely bored audiences across the world, I think it would be sweet justice for West Indian cricket after years of being slandered.
Listen, there's no better way to end that episode, people. Join us in the West Indies grind ball movement, people. It starts here in 2023. We'll be back with some more episodes over the forthcoming weeks. As ever, stay locked in for West Indies on 99.94 DM. Peace.